Hello, Barbara. Thank you for your question. I shall reply to it now. So I'll just read out your question. Thank you for your website and your YouTube posting. So helpful and down to earth. You once wrote that the compassion you thought you had for animals wasn't really compassion. And she's just quoted what I said. It seems so sweetly sad that my compassion had never really been compassion. It was a fight to try and stop out in the flow of life what was causing Lisa to suffer. Okay, Lisa. You take the collar off if you're going to eat your collar. Then I have also great difficulty with this idea. Animals being hurt and then nothing I can do about it. Please tell me how you are able to allow this or transcend this out in the flow of life. Well, I didn't allow it or transcend it. What fell away was that energy of personal, that energy of me dynamic that was bound to the body. And when that fell away, that personal energy, then the projection of that me into other body-mind mechanisms fell away. So the projection of what I thought other people would feel. So what the me thought other people would feel, and then an imagination of that. And that's what the Lisa character used to think was compassion. She used to think that compassion was imagining what other people felt. But that's just suffering, and that's just projection. It's complete self-centeredness. So to demonstrate this, the answer to this, I brought Khaleesi in, so I can show it to you physically. So what happens in the human dynamic, which doesn't happen in animals and doesn't happen in very young children. In your bed, Khaleesi. In your bed. On your bed. Sitting. Paw, please. Oh, paw, please. That's a good girl. Okay. So what doesn't happen in babies and animals is this personal energy. Because the human has the ability to reflect in time, whereas the dog has some form of sense of time, but it doesn't have language and the ability to reflect on that. It does have sounds that it recognises, but that's about it. So what happens, originally there is just aliveness. When the baby's born, there's just aliveness, and it's not, that aliveness is not bound inside the baby, it's everything and nothing. There's just pure aliveness, and the baby has no sense that it's a baby or it's a body. There's just pure beingness expressing itself, and there's no sense of baby, other, inside, outside. There's just what is, and no separation from what is. Because humans have complicated thinking, what begins to happen is the baby begins to perceive time or language, that you are a body and you are called John or Lisa or Khaleesi or Robert or whatever the name is, and that you are past action and future actions. You are a story in time. Prior to that thinking, functioning, happening, there was just aliveness, and it wasn't bound to a story. And this thinking and perceiving in time and space, and this me dynamic, is energetical primarily. So it's this energy of feeling bound, which goes along in time, which is also this time dimension to it of, I am somebody that was born 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Whereas the very young baby and the dog don't have this ability. So this is where I brought Khaleesi in to demonstrate this. She's doing very well. At this time, I did a Ustream last night, and at about this time, she gets puppy energy. At dawn and dusk are her most hyper times. So about 6 in the morning and 6 in the evening. See, we get hyper. So what was being described there was the actions of her body, of the body, and it's called her, and we also call it I. Khaleesi. Quick, quick, in your bed, please. In your bed. On your bed. Good girl. Good girl. So there can be a description. The adult human can describe what the body's done, and we call it her or she, or Khaleesi. These actions belong to Khaleesi. These actions belong to the body. But that isn't who Khaleesi is. That's descriptions that are happening in language, and it's a part of functioning that's happening in the human dynamic, this clever thinking, this ability to apparently perceive time. But what happened in the human, like I was saying earlier, was that became who you were. You are that time-bound entity, whereas that is just a function appearing in this. There's something that's been here prior to that language began, and prior to that language leaving, and that's aliveness, this beingness. So with Khaleesi, I'm calling her Khaleesi, but here, talking about Khaleesi, although it's so hard to say this part because obviously it's going to be in language, and this goes way beyond language, so I'm trying to point it in a language. So here, Khaleesi, there is not the thinking, the reflection that the human mind has. So if I were to put her in front of a mirror, she doesn't have the ability to recognise the body as her. She doesn't see a body. She doesn't recognise that there is no she really, ultimately, but there's no recognition that she has big, beautiful black ears, that she has a tattoo in one of her ears. They tattooed her at the vet, that she's got a black tail, that she's got these paws. Even though the body-mind mechanism functions as a dog, there's no internal dialogue that's in language and energy that's saying, I am this dog. So there's no sense that, or reflection that she is a body. There's also no reflection that she's emotions or feelings. Also no reflection that she's her past actions, something that she did in time. There's not the ability to reflect like this. I am a bad dog because yesterday I ran off with Lisa's socks, or whatever it was, or tomorrow I'm going to kill a rabbit, whatever the story might be. There's no ability to reflect like that. All there is aliveness with the programming of the body expressing itself, and then the programming of everything else expressing itself. And because there's not this ability to separate, to believe that she is something removed from life, there's just life expressing itself, the body, this dog body expressing itself, Lisa body expressing itself, the trees. There's no separation, everything is oneness. There's no her and other, there's just expression, there's just energy expressing itself in apparently billions of different forms. But there's no recognition of that, there's just expression happening. It's all the same thing. So because she doesn't have because there's no complicated thinking that's reflecting, saying I am my past actions, I am future actions, there's no energetic contraction to the body, and the energetic contraction to the body of personal is suffering. That is the suffering dynamic. So the dog doesn't suffer. The dog body, there is an experience of pleasure and pain, but there's no suffering here. There's just pure aliveness expressing itself in dog form. It is so cute. But she has no sense that she's anything, that she is anything. There is no her there, there's just expression. So, the dog doesn't suffer. All there is love, and the nature of everything is non-suffering, is absolute love, absolute boundlessness. And it's so different, the experience, to the human that perceives things through stories. She is a dog that's suffering and she must be feeling not loved and rejected. There's no sense of that there at all. There's just pure love. And it's so different. So everything that you project, or that the Barbara story projects onto the dog and what the dog feels, is an absolute illusion and is not what the dog feels. It's absolute love. And seemingly in the Lisa story, the way that this began to dissolve was when there was awakenings, there was seeing of this beingness, this absolute love. And it was so obvious that the animals, the birds, the bees can't suffer. It requires complicated thinking. It requires the ability to imagine yourself as something, as a body, as a feeling, as a thought, as a spirit, as a soul, whatever it is, as consciousness. It requires something, a removal from life, this removal, these thoughts, and then this energetic expression of I am in here and I am separate. And then that covers up the love. Beingness is absolute love. The dog expression has no sense of being abandoned like the human. The human feels kicked out of oneness and abandoned, and more than likely when you're seeing the dogs suffering, what Barbara is seeing is her own abandonment, her own sense of being kicked out of paradise. The dog was never kicked out of paradise. That's why it's called God. It's just God backwards. No animal was. So yeah, the body experiences pain, but the suffering isn't there. So that projection that Barbara has of, oh, it must be feeling unloved, or that's a horrible way to die, or what about the baby piglets that it's left behind, or it must be da-da-da. So everything that's projected on is just Barbara's story, projected onto an apparent external object. And that is not compassion, that is absolute self-centeredness. That is Barbara seeing herself everywhere. Compassion is when that energy of personal falls away and there's no separation from what is. It's not an act, it's not a way to perceive things, it's not a story of I did this action or that action. Compassion is life, is oneness. It's so cute. So there was a book that, in the Lisa story, there was a book that I read when I was really young, and the title was I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. And it was a reflection on her life and feeling like she was in a cage. And it really haunted me, that title, particularly because the character here was always projecting her suffering onto other animals, onto other objects. I remember even crying at teddies because I thought they were suffering. So hearing this title, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, always haunted the Lisa character, the Lisa story. And it was seen, when the me energy fell away, it was seen so differently, that title. The bird doesn't sing because it's suffering. The bird doesn't sing because it wants to get out of a cage. The bird sings because that's what the bird does, but it's not suffering. You could say the bird sings out of love, but that sounds really separate. The bird sings out of love. There's just love singing. And it might look to the human that the bird's suffering because it's got a lot of energy, so it's dancing around the cage in lots of odd ways. But the bird has no sense that it could be flying in the sky. It has no sense that it's a bird in a cage. It has no sense that it's had its freedom taken away or any of those stories. There's just absolute love expressing itself. And in that there might be an energy of feeling frustrated or agitated, but that's not suffering. Suffering is that dynamic of it's happening to me and I am separate from everything. It's happening to me, this bird, and I am locked in a cage. So now, even though I don't know who I am and there is no Lisa, I would love to say, I know why the cage bird sings, but just without the I. It's known, in a non-duality way, why the cage bird sings. Anyway, much love. Bye.